The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Reclaim IT Budgets and Wasted Storage Capacity webinar. This webinar will be presented by Jim McGann and Greg Jorgensen. Jim is the Vice President of Marketing at Index Engines. He has extensive experience with e-discovery and information management in the Fortune 2000 sector. Greg is a Solutions Architect at Index Engines with extensive experience in e-discovery. Please type any questions for Jim or Greg in the question area on the right of your screen, and they will get to them at the end of the webinar. So let's begin. Jim?
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody, for attending today's session. Today's session will be a few slides. We'll try to keep the slides to a minimum, just explaining the concepts here, and then a detailed demo of the technology. Sorry about that. Again, here are our titles and names and so on. My contact information is there. I'll put it up at the end as well in case you have questions. But as Jan said, if you do have questions, type them in the question section. We'll try to get them through the session, or if not, we'll get back to you towards once the presentation is over. For those of you that are not familiar with Index Engines, we've been in the market for a number of years providing information management and archiving solutions. Some of the unique features of Index Engines, and there really is a lot of interesting technology that we've built here to really solve enterprise class discovery and management and archiving scenarios. So what we provide is the intelligence across all classes of storage. So we can index data that's on primary network storage as well as secondary storage, such as backup tapes, backup images, and so on. We allow you to find, profile, and manage those enterprise data assets, and we're really focusing on the unstructured data, user files, and emails. And a lot of the business cases are really supporting information governance and management, from simple data center management and recouping storage costs or streamlining storage, the environment, to supporting e-discovery and information governance efforts. So what we are is an appliance that's uniquely scalable. A single appliance can really index at a metadata only up to a petabyte of data. If it's full content, it's less than that, but it's very scalable, very high performance, something that can run in the background and monitor your unstructured data and create a metadata index of that content. And because of the efficiency, it's very cost effective and easy to deploy. So the challenge, that everybody's facing, and we hear this every day from the clients that we speak with, is the environment is very complex. The data centers have gotten very large volumes of data. Nobody's really cleaned up a lot of that data for decades. So you've got piles and piles of content that's scattered about networks and servers. A lot of this content could be locked in proprietary repositories, and proprietary repository for unstructured data could be something like your backup. So you're using TSM or Networker, NetBackup for backup. All that content gets kind of captured in this proprietary image. Organizations save everything. So IT has really been charged with making sure data is available, and in order to do that, they make copies and copies of content in archives, in backup, across the network, and it becomes complicated, especially when you go into any kind of data center consolidation or migration. Moving that stuff, knowing the large portion of it has no value. So content's constantly copied and preserved and not really purged. And the users have a lot of control, so it's very difficult to implement policies. So letting the users have that power and do things like saving copies of files on servers. So a lot of organizations can set up shared network servers, user shares, for example. That could be in the petabytes. Email could be saved by users, so you may have an email retention policy for your Exchange or a notes environment, but users can save copies of that email on their desktop and create things like local PSTs that are difficult to manage. And in general, there's really just lack of knowledge of the content. And as data is aging, the stuff that was created last week or last month or even last year, by your chief executives has value, because the stuff that senior folks created, and because of the timestamp on it, it's current, it's important. Stuff that was created by, the people managing your mailroom, and it was created 15 years ago, probably has a lot less value, or redundant or duplicate data. So, as the data ages, it becomes very difficult to manage, very difficult to find, and there's really no master directory of that content. and it's very difficult to do a file-level analysis of the metadata that exists there. Some stats from some of the folks out there, including our friends at Gartner Group, showing that data storage is growing at 40 to 60% a year. We talk to folks that have storage capacity doubling every year. So it really depends on your business, but storage growth is just through the roof right now. Another great study from Gartner is talking about that through 2013, the business case for 95%, so most all of the information management programs, will really depend on reducing IT costs and managing information risk. So, charging IT with managing risk and providing a level of support around that while reducing their costs is a challenge, because you're asking them to do more with less, which is the common battle cry in today's data center. And there's a study by the CGOC, which is the Compliance, Governance, and Oversight Council in 2012, showing that a whopping 69% of the information, this is really the unstructured information, that's sitting around corporate networks has no business, legal, or regulatory value. So almost 70%, or almost 3/4 of what's currently sitting on your networks could disappear tomorrow, and no one would miss it at all. So I mean, that's a huge chunk. And then the funny thing is, if 70% of the stuff could disappear tomorrow, then no one would miss it, and storage growth is from 40 to 60%, you can basically connect the dots here. You can basically get a free year of storage upgrades, or no storage upgrades in a year if you do some defensible deletion or some cleanup of this content. Another chart from Gartner. Gartner just happens to put out some great statistics in this area. There's some great white papers that they offer. Is they did a survey at their data center conference in Vegas last December, that talks about what in terms of aging data, and this is the stuff that just kind of gets abandoned on networks and kind of just rots away. Is what's your biggest challenge with that stuff? It's really the bulk of the unstructured content, and by far 53% said it's just managing the unstructured user shares and expanding file shares, and that's really where we see a big pain point in terms of storage capacity being eaten away by these user shares. And it could be stuff that's just was important one day and just aged out of importance and became completely useless. It could be redundant and duplicate copy. It could be stuff that personal files that users are storing, like iTunes libraries. It could be ex-employee data. It's all sorts of stuff. But half of the folks out there say managing that stuff is one of their biggest challenges. So we're going to talk about data profiling. And data profiling is really the concept of providing a high-level view into the unstructured data sources. So it's really a metadata level index of that content. And what that means is really scanning those sources. So one of the important points here for the index engines technology is that it has a very high-performance indexing platform. So you don't want something that's going to sit on your network and take up significant network resources and bandwidth. What you need is something that's going to sit behind the scenes and as innovative as possible, or as low impact as possible, create this metadata level index, but also keep it updated with incremental updates. So the scanning technology that was developed is incredibly high speed, can scan using multiple streams of data scans, and it's an NFS or SIFS crawl through those networks, and it can crawl through at a terabyte per hour. And if you have slower networks, obviously you may not have the highest speed networks in your data center. If you have slower networks and geeky networks and so on, it could be have multiple multi-threaded streams of indexing happening in parallel. All sorts of tuning capability. But if you're doing your first bulk pass across, 100 terabyte server, you can use the high speed capability to index it over the weekend and be ready for bullet search on Monday morning. Also, when the scan happens, it generates a very rich metadata index that's incrementally updated. So this is something that would sit behind the scenes and continually review things like user shares, departmental servers, email servers, backup tapes even, offline backup tapes, to understand what's changed, what happened overnight, what happened over the last week, how did the data change, how is the data aging. This stuff kind of age out of importance and can be moved to another level of storage. So this index is created. And then you can use the index. So within the index is metadata information such as dates. Dates is one of the most important metadata fields in data profiling. So a lot of things like the last modified date shows you, is it an active file? Is it something that's content that's currently being used? Last access date is really showing, does the file have value? So if files do have value, they'll be accessed by users, beyond the user that just created them. Or create a date so you can see the age of it. But really, access and modified are really two of the more interesting dates within the data profiling area. The other is location. So where this stuff resides is important. So I mean, a lot of the stuff is which path, file name, size, and so on. User. So user is very critical too. In we integrate, as Greg will show you, we integrate into Active Directory and integrate all the take advantage of all those security permissions and so on. If you look at things like ex-employees, where is their data? When an employee leaves, you'll typically wipe out and clean out their desktop, but you won't get their data off the network out in the wild, right? So where is the data owned by ex-employees? When was it last accessed? So even though they're ex-employees, some users could be accessing it, so there is value to it. And then I mentioned we could also index, backup tapes or secondary storage, so you can index backup content. So you can even do that at a catalog level to see the age of the content, what type of data it is, and so on. So, having this, rich metadata index allows you to search it and make decisions about the content. And when we're searching, one of the more powerful capabilities of the technology that we'll show you today is the ability to do iterative or combined search technology, queries and filters. So say I want to point to a specific file server, or I want to point to a specific user. Say I want to just examine what John Doe owns, or I want to point to a specific file type like PST files or email files. So you can use the combination of the query and the filtering with the summary reports in order to generate, help make decisions about the content. So you want to say, and I'll show you some examples, like show me where all the multimedia files, and I think Greg will show you this in the demo. So where's all the video files in the network? Video files are not part of our business. That's all really personal stuff that people are saving. So where are all the video files? Okay, and then go in and do a query and query on those video files, and then do a summary report that says, well, who owns those? Where are they located? When were they last accessed? And you can use that to make some decisions. Or you could do a query on a department saying, these are all members of the HR department, and I could look at how much storage capacity and storage resources they're taking, in order to determine my chargebacks and so on. But here you can use a combination of queries and filters in order to make disposition decisions about the data. So a little bit of the workflow there on how data profiling is implemented. So in terms of data disposition, I mean the status quo or what people have really been dealing with over time is just let the data pile up. I mean you've got decades and decades of data that's sitting on your networks, and increasing storage capacity is the easiest way to solve that problem. It's just add more storage. We have a lot of our clients that are just getting really tired of adding storage and really tired of writing checks to those guys saying, what, I don't even know what I have, and I'm just increasing capacity. So companies are putting together data disposition policies or rules in order to manage this content. So a lot of this stuff is going to have no action on it. So the important stuff here is the stuff that's once you're looking at stuff that's beyond 2 years, that's kind of more the abandoned data or the aged data that's aged out of any kind of access or usefulness. But the stuff that hasn't been accessed, that's been accessed more currently in less than 2 years, is stuff that you want to monitor, or you just want to monitor in place. So monitoring data in place is an important concept here. Looking at the everyday working documents, applying policy to it, and say, as this document ages out to 2 years, for example, I want to move it to a less expensive storage environment. So putting those triggers in place and having the data profile, manage that, and when the triggers are hit, based on certain metadata criteria, the trigger could be, this person's now an ex-employee. The trigger could be, hey, this document is part of a project that needs to be archived. The trigger could be the age of the data, and so on. You can take action on it. Another area is archiving it. So, we have a lot of clients that are using our archiving capabilities and just saying, We just want to archive what legal and compliance and the regulatory folks need, for e-discovery purposes and so on, which really turns out to be only about, less than 10% of their content. So a lot of those folks that have been archiving everything kind of as an HSM strategy or a replication strategy, find that those archives have become very bloated. So not only are their networks bloated, but the archives bloated as well. So creating a legal hold or a compliance or regulatory archive will really push in about really about 10% of user content that exists out there. And the big chunk is remediate, so just get rid of stuff. So the stuff that has no business value, and you can really define classifications around here. So if people say, well, I'm worried about deleting stuff, it's really scary. So if you think about putting it in different buckets and saying, you know what, this content is owned by X employees and it's 100% duplicate with what exists on the network already. So getting rid of duplicate X employee data is probably incredibly low risk out there. That hasn't been accessed in 7 years, for example, is really low risk. No one will ever miss that stuff. So you can put together different classes of data, and we see customers remediating anywhere from 20% to 40% of what exists on the network. IBM is saying that, the CGOC is saying that earlier stat that 69% of data can be remediated. I mean, that's if you get rid of everything that you don't need, which is a tough thing to do. So, remediating 40% is a significant value to your organization. I'd say if you can, reclaim that storage, it's going to present definitely return on investment there. So this is a little bit about the product. It's an appliance. Octane is the name of our brand here, the name of our platform. So we have a data profiling engine. It would sit within your data center. It is the fastest indexing node that exists there for unstructured data on the market today, a terabyte per hour, using a single node. It's really purpose-built to solve these enterprise-class issues, and we have clients that are managing petabytes of data with this technology. No one is faster and more efficient than this platform. Accesses all data sources, so one of the unique capabilities here is that it accesses legacy data content. So the data that's in your legacy tapes, even legacy backup images, things that are on data domain could be indexed in order to be managed according to policy. And it's very cost effective. I'll talk about some of the pricing scenarios at the end. But because of the efficiency built into the platform, we pass along those cost savings to you and make it a very, very cost-effective solution. So typical projects in the petabytes, very efficient use of the technology. So TechSpec, it's a Linux-based platform. It's a 2U server, 8 terabytes of storage on board, supports up to a petabyte of metadata indexing, 72 gigabytes memory. It's fiber SCSI or network connection out the back. So if you're connecting to libraries, or tape drives, you use fiber or SCSI connections. Very high-speed indexing, low impact, so terabyte per hour indexing, as I mentioned incremental updates. We support NFS or CIFS crawling or high-speed NDMP processing. So if your filer is NDMP enabled, you can do an NDMP dump to the index engine for processing, very, very high speed. A very important point is the integration with Active Directory or LDAP. So we'll inherit all those security permissions. So we're not just looking at, we're looking at the data, but we can resolve resolve SIDs and determine who has access to what and so on. So I mean, the Active Directory integration is very important capability here. So in terms of the metadata, Greg will show you this in the demo in a minute, but the ability to extract from the environment user file information, things like the dates. Dates are really important because you're getting modified access, created dates. Size is also very important, so you can get a subset of data, say the age data that's aged out 7 years and no one's accessed it. How much capacity is that taking on my server? File name and path, a author-owner signature. So the signature is created at the indexing time that's using an MD5 hash to create a unique document signature for the files. So this is really what's being used for the deduplication capability, which we'll show you, Greg will show you in the reports. Email is also available, so you can index email. This is really more when you go into a full content index versus a metadata only. If you're going to do metadata only, you can find things like the containers, like PSTs, Exchange databases, things like that. If you do a full content, you'll get things like the dates, the to, from, mailbox information, folders, and things like that as well. And then the backup information if you're doing tapes, so backup time, server, and so on. So you can do things like, what data has not been accessed in more than 7 years, so you can get the full set of that content. You get things like, what's the data owned by ex-employees? So a lot of the data that's just sitting and rotting away in your network is stuff that's owned by employees that don't exist anymore. Where is John Doe's email? So this may be a legal or a discovery request, from your compliance department saying, where is this content? And clearly it's going to be in the on the Exchange server, but it could also be in backup images. It could also be in PSTs. It could be scattered about the network as well. For backup, we see a lot of people that have really tight backup windows. So it's like, why am I archiving data on tape that's more than 10 years old? You can start asking those questions to kind of streamline your backup window as well. Also, what percentage of the data is duplicate? A lot of corporations have implemented deduplication technology on a lot of their servers, but some of the user shares don't have that. So, what percentage of data is duplicate? So, typical questions we hear our customers asking the system. So, those are some of the reports, but the queries also give you the capability to look into the content, and I think Greg will show you some of the full content queries that are available. The ability to do query for personally identifiable information, or PII, which is things like Social Security numbers and credit card numbers. Organizations like financial services firms struggling with PII audits, this is a very valuable tool. Querying on file properties, saying, finding certain file types or email types or backup properties and so on. So some examples here are, help me perform a PII audit, or show me where all the PSTs are located, or find what data is on the user share server. So you can kind of focus it specifically on a location and say what kind of data exists on there. What backup tapes contain email data. So very valuable questions that come up. You can get instantaneous answers through the use of data profiling. So some sample scenarios of these reports are, one of the more common ones is age data. So you can do a filter and a query, say, focus on a specific user share, then report on data last access in more than 5 years. Any result sets there, you can, for example, move that stuff to a cloud. Some people may want to remediate it or purge it. So there's different use cases. Ex-employee data, you can query by owner name, so you can upload a list of owners, of people that are ex-employees, find the data that they own that hasn't been accessed in more than 7 years, showing that it doesn't have any business value, and then delete that content out. Departmental data, such as like the R&D server you can point to, query for specific project keywords. So a lot of clients are using the technology, say they want to archive a project off the network. The project's come to completion or is heading into manufacturing. They want to archive it off the network. They can go through that scenario, find that content, and move it out to an archive. Multimedia files, I think Greg will show you that scenario where you can search for audio and video files, find who owns them, what's the capacity, and notify their management that, hey, they're storing this kind of content on the servers and so on. PII audit I mentioned, managing PSTs, same thing. So you can query and say, find me files that are PSTs, who owns them, when were they last accessed, and then put together a policy or management environment to support that content. So here's a sample workflow. These are screenshots. You'll see the live demo in about 2 minutes. But you can filter on specific locations. So this is using sections of the GUI. So you can say, I want to filter on specific filers or folders within the filers, and then generate a report on last modified date. So you can see here on selecting these filers over here, you're seeing that of these, a large portion haven't been modified. This is the modified report in more than 5 years. In fact, 42% of it, in this case, it's only representing 57 gig. That could be representing 57 terabytes on your network. Have not been accessed in more than 5 years. So you can filter on these reports because they're active reports. You can see I've unchecked everything except for more than 5 years. So filtering on that, I can then generate another report. So you see the iterative capability of this. Think of the stuff that's greater than 5 years old, who owns it? And you can see here that David Wright owns 63% of it, and it's 20 gig, which could be 20 terabytes again in your environment. So within a couple of clicks, you have detailed information of, 60 terabytes of my data could easily be wiped because David Wright doesn't work here anymore. He was traded to another company, and I can clean up 60 terabytes of content. You can also output reports too. I mean, Greg will show you how you have the delete capability to directly delete it from the interface, but you can output output these reports, these are CSV text files, which will give you everything you need to know to process that deletion, the path, file name, and all sorts of other stuff here. So you could do things like purge it, move it, copy it, encrypt it using your own tools if you like. So flexibility there. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Greg. Greg's going to take you through the demonstration and show you how the product works.
Hi, good afternoon. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log into our search GUI that Jim talked about, the browser-based GUI. So they're going to log in here as an admin to one of our demo boxes. The first thing I'm going to show you is going over that tie-in to Active Directory and creating that network, that LAN data indexing job. So I'm going to go over to our network area here, Location Manager, and then Discovery. So there's basically 3 different ways that we can go and point to a file share to start that indexing job. First is through Active Directory. As you see here, you'll select that Active Directory icon. You type in your server name, and then you type in the username and password for the account profile that you want to use. So we have some clients that are using an admin level account or a service level account. As long as that account has read privileges to the shares you're indexing, you'll be able to index under that Active Directory user profile's security rights. The other method here that I just clicked on is host. So you can type in a host name or a few host names. Again, typing in that username and password, and we'll be able to index based off the security rights of that user. The last is here IP address. You could directly type in a IP address or a range of IPs, and then you could discover what's on your network that way as well. After you would go and run this discovery tool, you would go over to our job creation, our job definition page, and there you have a few options. You would name your job, and then you would decide if you want to run your job once. You could run it manually at one time, or you could run it on a scheduled basis. And that's where Jim discussed the incremental updates and refreshes to the index. So the first time you would go and run an indexing job on a filer or host or whatnot in your network, you would do it on a full basis. So it would fully index all of that data on the metadata level. You could then schedule that to be repeated, like Jim said, on an hourly basis down to a weekly, monthly, yearly. However frequently you want that refresh of that index, you would schedule that. It would go and incrementally update based on anything new or changed in your environment. So you could use this for some trending reports and get that fresh view into your network. So that's about connecting and creating that LAN indexing job. I'm going to go over here to our search interface. And once I go to the search interface, the first thing I'm going to do is go over some of those metadata values that Jim discussed in the slides. The one very powerful thing about our tool is the ability to combine those base level summary reports with custom query of metadata to get that custom profile that you're looking for. So the first area here I'm going to show you on this metadata level profile is the file properties. So you can limit your profile based off a set of file level properties, such as a modified date range, which is very common, data size, and then there's also a bunch of categories down here where we categorize some extensions, file types. So if I go on extension, for example, I can go look at the different audio extensions out there. I can go down and look at the different document extensions. These are all ways to profile your data. So for example, if I clicked here on Word documents, I can go run a scan and find out what host my Word documents reside on, what's the date range of those, how old are they, or how new are they, what owners have Word documents and where they're located. So I'm going to go through a few of those use case scenarios that Jim described in a moment. The other set of metadata values that we can go by is document properties. So that's the next category down here. So this is also captured when we do a metadata level index. Again, you have your title, your author, your create date, and your modified time. This is all of the, again, document properties of documents, of unstructured documents out there. The third area is email properties. So if you were to have that full index that Jim talked about, you'd be able to go by these the to, from, and CC categories here. This is if we're indexing into the TST, as well as all your different date ranges and down to the actual class, what type of email, what type of calendar or contact or whatnot. The other area outside of filters that you're able to go and search by is going to be our location. So down here, if you go to your locations tab, These are all the different hosts and filers out there that we indexed in that indexing part of the admin level, the job creation that I showed you in the beginning. You can limit your data profile to a server, a set of servers, or you can actually go down into that subdirectory there and start indexing down into different levels in those subdirectories. And you can limit your search just to one level down if you'd like. It's all about customizing your data profile report to what you're looking for. So what I'm going to do here is also going to clear that screen out. And I have a subset of tag data that I normally use for demos that I'm going to use today for data profiling. So I'm just going to limit my search to this subset of data. I'm going to go and run the search on that data. And what you're looking at now is our Reports tab. All of our base interactive summary reports show up here on the right. Again, I usually refer to them as base reports because you could update these and customize these to your needs based off those metadata values I just walked you through. So what you're looking now is that subset of data that I isolated my search to. You're looking at a breakdown here of our file types report. So again, it's going to show you all the different file types. It's going to give you a graph of the most common and the most volume here. And it will show you all the other types down below. And these are all interactive reports, so I can further call from within the reports as I'll show you. Other reports here on my report drop-down screen, I can go from file types. I can now go look at file extensions. I could switch over to the owner report, find out who owns the data that I just ran the search on. You can go look at a modified time report. See what the date here is. This subset of data I'm looking at, a majority of that data is greater than 5 years, and it gives you the breakdown below. Another report is the size report. You can get a sample of the sizing of the files and what the breakdown is by size. These are all cullable again, so you could interactively cull and then look further into some of these size reports and whatnot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a scenario. So one of the common workflows we see from customers is finding PST data out there, looking for those abandoned PSTs. So I'm going to go back to our extension report. I'm going to see the breakdown here by file extension. I'm going to go back here. Let me refresh my screen. So I see the breakdown by extension here. And let's say I want to further look into this PST files. I want to see where those files are, what the last access times and modified times are, who owns that data, what host they reside on. So I deselected all the options. I selected just the PST files. I'm going to go update my search now so I can further look into those. I see that there are 102 of those. By scrolling down here to our owner report, now I'll find out who owns those PSTs on the network. I could then go and find out what host those reside on, find out the locations. I can go see the size of those. So I'm going to look at the size of those PST containers. And then last, let's see how when they were last modified, what that modified times were. So from here, I can see the breakdown of the last modified times. Let's say I further wanted to look into a few of these date ranges. I could select those. Again, update my report. And to update my report, it's going to show me just that data I isolated to, finding those abandoned PSTs. And then now I can go do a couple things here. So I can go back to my Results tab now. This is going to show you the breakdown on the file level. I'm going to see the names of those PST files. If I click on one of these, it's going to show me the metadata values for this particular file. I'm going to scroll up here, and I'll see all the metadata values for this particular file, this PST file here. I could then go and tag all these files. So let's say I want to delete these, defensively delete these. The first thing I'd want to do is go and tag all my results. I'd want to create some kind of a tracking report. So I'd go and download a CSV copy of the report here. And that's going to show me all the metadata attributes for these files, for these isolated PST files that were abandoned, I'm supposing, due to the last modified date being so old. So this CSV report is going to show us a couple things. So there's a row here for every PST file my query just found, and it populates all of the metadata attributes. So before I go and defensively delete these, I want some kind of report like this so I have an audit trail showing why I deleted them and then show that it's outside of my policy for this sample. So again, it's going to give you items such as file path, file names. I'm going to show you the owner of those, when that last modified time was. All of the metadata available for that, for those particular files will be populated here. So now going back to the index engine search interface, now that I downloaded and I have an audit trail of those isolated files that for this example that I'm going to go and delete, now I can actually go and hit that delete button. And I'll be presented here with a few different options. First is I can delete these from the index engine's index segment. Second here is going to be able to go out and actually delete them from the source, delete them from that source in your environment. And we're also adding an option here to delete from both at the same time, so you don't have to run this twice. So there'll be an option to delete from both the index segment on your index engine's appliance, as well as deleting it from source. And depending on when you last ran a refresh of your index, we have kind of a safety net here, which is to verify the modification times. So an example of that in use would be if I ran an index and I'm working off an index here that's a month old, and I isolated, let's say, all PST files that were older than 5 years to defensively delete them now. I want to check to make sure that modification time hasn't changed since I last ran this index a month ago. So this will catch anything. So should one of those users that hasn't touched one of their PSTs in 5 years, should they have gone in and modified that PST in any way in the last month since I created my index, this would verify and flag that for me so I could then remove it from the set of data that I'm going to go and delete. So that workflow there is for finding PSTs, finding information about who owns them, where they are, sizes, modified dates, so you can then classify it into defensible deletion or putting it into cheaper storage or taking one of those paths that Jim discussed earlier. I'm going to clear my screen out here and run through another scenario or two with you. So I'm going to, again, isolate my data set here to that demo set of data I have. I'm going to run my search here in my reports tab. And this time I'm going to look for audio files. I think that was one of the scenarios that Jim discussed earlier with you. So once I have my data set isolated, I'm going to go here to our file level properties. I'm going to go down to those groups of different file extensions that we have. And I'm going to select, let's look for all audio and video files on this file share I had selected. So you could select on a single level for if you want to just look for a single extension, or I'm doing a whole category of audio files. I'm going to do the same thing for video here, all those video files. I'm going to run my query. I'm going to go out and find those files. So for all the audio and video files on this directory that I just searched, gives you the date range of those. I can go look at the file extensions for those. So I learned I have MP3s, AVIs, and SWF files. You'll see the size of those files, see how much storage they're consuming. Again, I can look at the owners of those. Look at the host to see where those reside in my network. That's for finding audio files. Another common workflow that clients typically come to us with is helping them find PII data out in their environment. So what I'm going to do here is go to our query tab. We have a pattern recognition query that runs an algorithm search to identify different credit card numbers or social security numbers. So I have this as a saved query. I'm going to go down here to my saved PII pattern search query. I'm going to load that query. What this is doing, it's going to run that pattern recognition algorithm, looking for the algorithm of Visa card numbers, MasterCard numbers, American Express numbers, and Discover card numbers. And I have it located to just searching that data profiling filer I have tagged for demoing. So now I'm going to go and run that search. Again, it's going to update and refresh all of my summary reports here, so I can see what host my PII data resides on. It's on 2 hosts here. I can see what owners of the data there are. So here I have 3 different owners in my environment of that PII data. I can see what types of files those are, to see what kind of files that data is contained in. Then I can go over here to the results tab, and if you have that full text index, which would enable you to run this pattern recognition on the full text, I can actually go and select one of these files here and look to see where in the file that algorithm is picking up a similar number that meets that criteria. So again, the top of the reconstruction is all of the metadata attributes for that file I just selected. Scrolling down, since this happens to be a full text index for this example, I can go over here and I can see the full text of the document and see the highlighting of numbers that match that algorithm sequence for one of the credit card numbers in this example. We're able to do the same thing for Social Security card numbers too. There's an algorithm for that, for looking for Social Security numbers out there in data as well. I'm going to hand it back over to Jim.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. That was helpful. Okay. And we'll wrap this up. Okay. If you do have any questions, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, we can take them during the offline. But some of the sample workflows, and the nice thing about data profiling technology is it's very flexible. You can deploy it and start small and attack certain projects and then expand from there. We have customers that we're working with that have terabyte servers. We have customers that have petabyte servers that we're working with. But the most common one we see is age data cleanup. So just find the age data, understand what you have, and you don't need to clean it. I mean, some people get a little skittish about deleting data. You can understand what you have and then take that information to legal. So, I mean, data profiling is a good communication tool between legal to understand what you have and let legal make the decision. So, if you want to get the monkey off your back and go to legal and say, hey, this is what we have, this is a profile of it, tell me what to do with it, let legal make those decisions about it. Data tiering, leveraging less expensive storage like cloud storage and moving content out. You can do all those queries that Greg was doing and move it out to a cloud. So stuff that has been accessed in more than 3 years or 5 years, you can move it to a cloud environment and allow, let users request that stuff, if it's out there, to retrieve it. Managing large multimedia files, PII audits, another one that Greg did some demonstration on. Email management, PST management, storage capacity allocations and chargebacks, understanding who owns what or which departments own what, and so on. So this is an interesting stat from, it's the Compliance Governance and Oversight Council. It was done in 2012. There's some great research that this organization does. That, and obviously, your mileage may vary here. It depends on your organization. This is widely contingent on what type of industry you're in. But they published a stat that, stuff that's required for legal hold is typically a small piece. It's typically 1% or so of what exists out there. What's required for records retention, like regulatory policy, is typically around 5%. What has business value? And this is really the current stuff, the stuff that hasn't aged out, beyond any kind of realistic business value, is really about 25%. And the stuff that can be defensively deleted is the bulk of it, 69%. So when you look at that, and even if your numbers are, 40% can be defensively deleted or is really kind of abandoned or aged data, that's a significant portion of what exists out there. And it's not only that it's affecting your, storage capacity, it's affecting liability because the stuff is just laying out there and not being managed. It affects your backup and disaster recovery environments and so on. So, I mean, it has more impact on just taking up storage. One of the important points that people ask all the time is, they have tools out there already that do some of this stuff. I mean, you have to break this space down into 3 different areas. There's a lot of tools that manage access logs, these log-centric tools. And they're in access to the security logs and the access logs. They're really more for security management of the, who has access to what files. So it's really more of a security compliance analysis. There's capacity-centric tools, those old storage resource management or SRM tools that exist out there are really used for capacity planning. They look at stuff at block levels and look at storage from a storage capacity point of view. What we're talking about today is really more the file-centric stuff in data profiling. It really analyzes the files and metadata. It looks at it from a different point of view. So there are different tools out there that you may have installed or maybe looking at that look at the data and analyze it from a very different perspective. So, for true information or data profiling or file analysis, you really need the file-centric tools that we showed you today. So, I mean, the key advantages is, it's kind of a wrap-up slide is, better knowledge. So, I mean, storage, is kind of a dumb environment. You don't know what's there. There's too much stuff to have any kind of clue as to what exists. This provides you a level of knowledge into that content so you can really streamline your capacity, clean up unnecessary data. Legacy tape remediation can be done using data profiling, so you can profile your legacy tapes even and get a view of that content and make some decisions about it. So not only cleaning up stuff, but improve your support for legal and compliance, and help define or refine policies, and really just overall implement better information governance strategies. So, I mean, where's your return on investment here if it's not obvious to you in terms of recouping or reclaiming storage? Then you can look at things like, your backup and data management, how much you're paying to backup and manage this stuff. Backup windows are tight. If you could free up your backup window by remediating large chunks of data, if you were backing up 40% less data, your backup window would be significantly reduced. How to really streamline your compliance and legal requests, manage sensitive data, develop archiving strategies. We constantly have IT professionals that are in touch with us saying, being asked to develop an archiving strategy, how could I do that without understanding what I have? Data breaches, data breaches, every time you see those, published, data is breaching firewalls, it's because it's not being managed properly. If it's that sensitive that you're worried about it breaching out to unknown hands, then it should be protected and secured properly instead of just remaining loose on the network so someone could go out there and it could get leaked or so on. Security policies, policy audits. One of the big things that customers do is create policy and leave it for the users to implement. So we have customers that do policy audits and say, let me check and see what's out there. I mean, our policy is not to allow PST email archives to be created. They do a policy audit and they see tens of thousands of PSTs. So something's clearly wrong out there, and this kind of gives you a view into that. Mergers and acquisitions. So as you're acquiring a company or merging with a company, you can do a data profile on that content and understand what you have. One of the other ones that should be on here is data center consolidation. As you're moving data or migrating data to new servers or consolidating, first know what you have, because a lot of the stuff you can leave behind and not have to move. Getting started, this is I think the last slide. A couple of approaches here. Do a proof of concept. Start small, but select servers with mystery data or dark data. And the solution here is selling at list price for $1,000 a terabyte plus the hardware. The hardware is a little pricey there at $13K. We're looking at putting a VMware version out there that will eliminate that cost. But $1,000 a terabyte, not a lot of money to really understand what you have, and it's fully scalable up, so you can just increase capacity significantly. If you don't want to implement this in your lab, you can use our cloud lab. We have a cloud lab where you can send us data, which is easiest sent on you're not going to mail us one of your servers, but you can send a recent backup. You send us a recent full backup at $150 a tape. We will create a profile report which will be deliverable to you that will show you a complete analysis of that content. And again, the stuff that's in your backup tapes is really a snapshot of what exists in your network. So you'll get a full view into that content. So very affordable, very easy ways to get started. Start small and just knock off some of these more cluttered or servers that you really want to understand what's on those. We have a paper here, so here's my email address. If you do have questions, I know we're over our allocated time. If you do have questions, my email address is there. Shoot us an email or just reply to the invite that you got for the webinar. I'm happy to send you this white paper or a copy of the slides, or speak with you and talk to you about your current needs. So again, let's wrap it up. If you do have any questions, our website has tons of great information on data profiling. Make sure you use that. But I want to thank Greg, and I want to thank you all for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future. Thanks, and have a good day.